Now, there's a new expose out in the Washington Post that reveals how Ivanka's clothing lines, Ivanka Trump, relies on basically underpaid laborers in unsafe factories in different foreign countries where they can be produced cheaply in order to do her business, in order to, of course, sell her clothing line. Now, the Washington Post had released this report that builds on some previous stories that have cited that the Trump's brand's use of cheap labor, noting that her company runs against industry trends, as many other fashion labels are increasingly involved in improving workers' lives and working conditions. So that's very, very interesting. So she says, well, I'm for working women, and I'm for enhancing women's lives through work all around the world. And that's what my role in the White House is going to be. I'm gonna help women, all right? I'm a total feminist, right? And yet, her business, which, again, she did leave control of to someone else. She no longer runs her business directly, but does have veto power in the company for decisions. Well, her company is still using this underpaid labor, this underpaid foreign labor, to make their overly expensive clothes. And she's going against industry trends of actually trying to increase pay and increase worker safety. Now, that's very, very interesting. Now, again, she touts herself as somebody who wants to improve the lives of working women. And again, most of the people working in her factories are women that work in places like China, Bangladesh, and India. Now, let me get into some of the disastrous findings. Now, first, here's a quote from Ivanka Trump brand president Abigail Clem. Now, she told the Post, "The mission of this brand has always been to inspire and empower women to create the lives that they want to live and give them the tools to do that. We're looking to ensure that we can sort of live this mission from top to bottom with our licensees, with our supply chain." And that's very interesting because she mentions the supply chain, which is a very important part of the story. So the first question is, are they doing that? Well, let's take a look. The Post had used data drawn from U.S. Customs log and international shipping records to trace Trump-branded products from different factories to ports around the United States. Now, the Post also interviewed workers at 3 garment factories that have made Trump products who said their jobs often come with exhausting hours, subsistence pay, and insults from supervisors if they don't work fast enough. So here we go. Now, this is a 26-year-old sewing operator in Subang, Indonesia, who says she has helped make Trump dresses. She told the Post, quote, "My monthly salary is not enough for everyday expenses. Also, not enough for the future." You have another one, Kalpana Akhtar, a Bangladeshi labor organizer and former garment worker who was first hired at a factory at the age of 12, said, quote, "We are the ultra poor. We are making you beautiful, but we are starving." If that's not clear enough, there's more. Kay, a 26-year-old sewing machine operator, told the Post that she makes the equivalent of $173 a month. That is her region's minimum wage. Her full name, like that of other workers, is being withheld by the Post because workers fear punishment or being fired for simply speaking with the media. Now, she says that she spends $23 to rent her small studio in the bustling factory town of Subang, where she sleeps on a mattress on the floor and hangs her clothes from a string hung along the wall. Well, that is just high living, let me tell you what. Now, she saves the rest of her 2-year-old daughter, but worries that she will not be able to afford elementary school fees, which can cost as much as $225 a year. So apparently in Subang, they don't have universal pre-K or not pre-K. They also don't have that, but they don't have universal K through 12 education. They actually have to pay out of pocket. Oh man, that is a conservative wet dream. Like, oh, I can't wait to make regular people pay for regular school. But anyway, now, and that's a disaster for one, right? She's saving up all of her money in order to send her kid to school so that her kid has more opportunities than just working in an Ivanka Trump factory. Wow. Now, another 25-year-old woman said that she was hired as a fabric cutter on a day-to-day basis. They pay her a monthly salary that ranges between $68 to $135 for as much as 24 days of work, far below the region's minimum wage and at a rate that workers' advocates say is probably a violation of local law. The fabric cutter and her husband say they have to borrow money in order to cover their daily expenses and those of their 10-year-old son, who lives 45 minutes away with his grandmother. She sees him about once a month. Oof. Wow. Again, these are disastrous working conditions. No, but we're empowering and inspiring women to do better. Really. A woman that can only see her son once a month. And another woman who can't even save up enough for her daughter's education. Not only that, but besides the pay, you also have bad working conditions inside the factory. Now, workers said that supervisors berate employees if they fall behind their targets or if stitches needed to be redone. They would say, "Work faster. These clothes are urgent. Why do you work slow?" And if that's not bad enough, there's more information. Now, in China, where 3 activists investigating factories making Ivanka's line were recently arrested, assembly line workers produce Ivanka Trump-woven blouses, shoes, and handbags. Laborers in Indonesia stitch together dresses and knit tops. Suit jackets are assembled in Vietnam, cotton tops in India, and denim pants in Bangladesh, a country with a huge apparel industry where garment workers typically earn a minimum wage of about $70 a month, and where some have recently faced a harsh crackdown from factory owners and others seeking higher pay. Now look, we had these situations back in America in the Industrial Revolution or afterwards. You had a lot of garment workers, you had a lot of child laborers that were making very, very little amounts of money. And the factory owners were using police in order to basically keep their profits high and their expenses low. So they would team up with the local police to punish anybody who got out of line. This is what happened in America. So now that part of the world, Bangladesh, India, Vietnam, those other countries, they're going through the same thing right now. And they're actually trying to fight for their own labor rights that here in America we tend to take for granted. So that's an important point that I want to bring up. Now, Ethiopia, it's another example where manufacturers have boasted paying workers a fifth of what they earn in Chinese factories, which is already disastrous. Workers made thousands of pounds of Ivanka Trump branded shoes in 2013, according to shipping data. So, look, the conditions there are horrific. And it's very, very clear. Now, Ivanka's line, she's the most high-profile example, but she's not the first one. And she won't be the last person or company to exploit cheap labor overseas. It actually feeds into a much larger point than just dealing with the Trumps. Okay, now but the thing that makes it important to bring up Ivanka for is the hypocrisy. Okay, now her father Donald Trump ran on a "let's buy American, we're gonna buy American." Now Clem, Trump brand president, says the company is exploring ways to produce some goods in the United States, but she says to do it at a large scale is just currently not possible. So she cites things like, well, we don't have the machines, the infrastructure. It's not a lot of people would be willing to do it. So we can't really do it here. We got to do it in Bangladesh. Now, her attorney, Jamie Gorelick, told the Post in a statement that Ivanka is concerned about recent reports regarding the treatment of factory workers and expects that the company will respond appropriately. Now, that includes the possibility of hiring a nonprofit workers' rights group to increase oversight of its production and help improve factory conditions, the company's executives told the Post. Now, look, I hope that they're serious about this. For me, I got this sort of naive hope that Ivanka, once she realizes this, she goes, oh, God, we got to do something about that. That's shitty. Yeah, let's fix that. And look, again, I hope that that's what they're going to do. But the problem is, as I alluded to earlier, the bigger problem is how the garment industry actually does its business. Now, like many U.S.-based apparel companies, the Trump brand signs deals with suppliers, which in turn contract manufacturing work to factories around the world. That system allows products to be sold to consumers for lower prices and creates economic opportunity and risks for workers in poorer regions. Now, it also creates deniability. Oh, I didn't know our supplier was using exploited labor. Holy crap. We didn't know that because we contract it and then they subcontract it. So that's how they get away with this stuff, by the way. Now, as far as risks go, okay, well, some people might argue, what risks? They're bringing jobs to the area, Jeff. I mean, without Ivanka Trump, people wouldn't have jobs. Would you rather they don't have jobs? Well, it's a ridiculous argument, but basically it comes down to, hey, quit bitching, you got scraps. It's a ridiculous point, okay? Now, what risks actually exist? Now, in December, thousands of workers seeking higher pay had went on strike outside the capital city of Dhaka in Bangladesh. In response, police rounded up and arrested several dozen labor organizers, and factory owners filed criminal complaints against hundreds of workers, according to the Human Rights Watch. An estimated 1,500 garment workers were suspended or fired. So that's the risk for your job, obviously economic security, which they didn't really have as much in the first place. But what little they had, gone. And there's also concerns of where people lose their lives. Now, some of you might remember the factory fire that killed 29 people in Bangladesh. Now, that happened because they didn't have fire exits. You couldn't leave the building. It was on fire. You couldn't leave. And people were crushed or burned to death in this accident. Okay, 29 people. Now, that factory wasn't involved with the Ivanka Trump brand. However, that's sort of indicative of the kind of working conditions that they have in some of these countries. Now, these safety issues, well, they need to be dealt with because they're very, very serious. Now, unfortunately, Ivanka Trump's brand hasn't seemed to have much of an interest in getting involved with the industry since that, happened back in 2010. The industry has been taking steps to reduce these things and actually make it a little bit safer and a little bit better for workers. Ivanka Trump's brand hasn't been involved. In fact, you have Adam Zeidenweber, who is G3's vice president. And G3 is, of course, a New York-based clothing distributor. He's the vice president of global outsourcing compliance, saying that, quote, the retailers, the consumers aren't asking for it. None of the consumers say, well, this was made in a building that was going to fall down. So that's somebody affiliated with the Ivanka Trump brand. And he's supposed to be a global sourcing compliance officer, vice president. And he says, nobody asks about it. I mean, nobody talks about it. So we're not interested in here. We're not interested in doing anything to help safety because our consumers, they're not worried about it. They haven't brought this up. They're saying they're not going to buy it. They didn't say that they're not going to buy this stuff. You know why? It's because most people, I think, don't know that these issues exist. They don't know where their clothes are coming from. They don't know that a lot of people are being exploited in terrible working conditions, also they can get a cheap shirt. Okay? And what most people don't know doesn't hurt the brand. Okay? It won't hurt the brand. So that's a major problem with our clothing supply chain. And what it means is that our corporations have essentially created a business model that exploits workers, gives deniability, and, well, it exploits workers and gives them deniability. That's bad enough, okay? And also puts them in very, very unsafe working conditions. So it's terrible, right? Now, a lot of people say that they're not actually exploiting them, these companies, but it seems fairly clear that a lot of these subcontracted factories actually are exploiting workers. Now, they don't want to bring these factories to America because they claim they can't afford it without drastically raising prices, which leads me to another point. The Post writes that if Ivanka Trump's company followed the president's exhortations to move production to the United States, its prices would rise dramatically, potentially pushing buyers away and dragging down company profits, according to industry experts. And the Institute for Global Labor and Human Rights, a nonprofit organization, estimated in 2013 that a denim shirt that cost $3.72 to make in Bangladesh would cost more than 3 times as much to make in the United States. So they're not interested in that. And I think a lot of consumers might also not be interested in that. Let's keep it real. A lot of people really like having their more expensive or less expensive shirts. I like going to Walmart and picking up a shirt for $5. It's sad, right? Very, very sad. Now, thing is, when it comes to Ivanka's brand, it's very well known that it's actually cheaply made. It's very overpriced, cheaply made. I mean, there's been people that are saying, yeah, we bought Ivanka Trump shoes and they fall apart after 3 months. But they're overpriced. So, I mean, you kind of get what you pay for at this point. Or actually, you don't. You get less than what you pay for. Now, the results of this, of course, being overpriced and very cheaply made, is that in 2016, G3 told Forbes that the Ivanka Trump clothing line generated $100 million in retail revenue over the past year. And that's what you get when your shit's overpriced and your staff is vastly, vastly underpaid. Your labor. Now, look, I'm not saying that they have to move to America to fix this and pay $15 an hour, which would be awesome. It'd be great if they could do it, but you are going to see some price increases, and I'm actually okay with that. I'm actually okay with paying more for a t-shirt if I know that it's not made with exploitive labor. Now, not everybody will be able to make that leap, but at least I will be able to, and I can admit that. But if you're not going to do that, at least what you could do, if you're, Abigail Clem or even Ivanka Trump, who's in the perfect position to actually do this, to get involved with that supply chain and say, hey, man, what we're going to do now is we're going to go out there and we're going to make sure that all these workers, these garment workers, and I'm going to make this a pet project of mine while I'm in the White House, to make sure that people in these areas have labor rights. That's what I do. Because if they're not paying their workers enough to survive, then what you're doing is simply exploitation. And any business that has to require or that has to exploit workers in order to make a profit simply doesn't deserve to exist. So, look, this was a huge report. I would urge everybody to read the whole thing. There's going to be a link in the description. It's a very interesting read, and it shows just how messed up our supply chain system is when it comes to just simple things like clothing. So I urge everybody to check it out. Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more like this, please hit the subscribe button below. And if you want to support truly independent progressive media, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/TYTNation.